What's up, guys? I'm Dave McConey. If you're watching this, you're obviously familiar with Pete Rubish. I had him on my podcast recently, the Brains and Gains podcast, where you can find part one on my channel. Part two is going to be here. Pete and I get into a lot of his history with lifting, when he started using performance enhancing drugs, some of the consequences of that, and what he's been doing to remedy that since. So we have a great discussion. We're definitely going to have to get Pete back on the podcast to go into more of his training details. But I thought you guys would be really interested in this. So we split it up. Part two is here. Part one is on my channel. Hope you guys really enjoy the content. If you do, definitely make sure to subscribe to both channels, give the videos a like, and we'll definitely do another one. Also, comment down below things you want to see us talk about for the next podcast, and we'll make sure to address it. Thanks.
On 60 milligrams, I was definitely weaker, but I felt pretty good still. Like I felt
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, that's like, when I talk to people and clients, it seems to be the experience of many is that, and even like some of the, I don't want to say names, but like some of these retired bodybuilders, like they stay on usually not 60, but 100, 150 milligrams of TRT, and they can still maintain a lot of their size. And people say, well, they're lying about what they're taking, but I believe it. I'm not saying you can maintain peak size, but these bodybuilders who are get up to 300 pounds, they're still seeming to maintain like 260, 270 on TRT levels, whereas if they were to drop to be natural, I can't imagine they would be staying nearly that
No,
size.
no, because I was 250 pounds still when I was on like a little bit of testosterone. I
Wow.
don't even remember if it was like 150 or 250, but it was something like that. And I was still 250 pounds. And I looked like I was still, I looked pretty big. And
Nope.
now I'm like 216, 217 on nothing. But I dieted hard. Now that's part of it. But at the same time, it's like,
So you're leaner now.
yeah, well, not even. That's the
You're
funny
not that
thing.
much leaner.
I'm pretty, this is the sad part, but it shows how powerful things are. I'm probably the same level of body fat I was at
Wow.
250 that I am now at 217
Wow.
because of just muscle loss and such. But um,
I mean,
yeah,
that is what I consistently hear. It's just kind of amazing. Like, so basically, even on TRT, you're talking over 30 pounds of muscle that you're able to maintain that you
yes,
now have lost. And you're still working out, right? You're still
yes,
eating protein. I mean, because I know like Vigorous Steve with who does a lot of with Leo, he just stopped eating. He had some other issues, but he stopped eating. He did like a super long fast, stopped working out, so no protein, anything like that. So his size loss makes sense. But you're talking now 6 months, and you lost 30. It was it 6 months you said?
five.
Five. So 5 months, and 30 plus pounds. I mean that's kind of amazing. But like you said, it underscores how dramatic. Yeah, that's why I hate when people say it's the icing on the
Yes.
cake. It's like, dude, yeah, you have to have other things in place, of course. But if the icing on the cake means another freaking 40 pounds of muscle, sure, it's the icing on the cake. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I've really realized how skewed that mentality is now. Now that I've like done it, I'm like, no, it
Yeah.
makes a massive difference.
Yeah.
Because what we like to do when we're on cycle or whatever, or like when we're doing like a cruise dose, like, well, I'm just on a cruise dose. It's not helping that much. But I'm like,
Yeah.
it makes a mess. I could pull 800 like 40 pounds on a cruise dose, and I like still for 840 pounds. Now I'm like struggling to get back to 700.
Wow.
It's hilarious. It's just like bench, I'd bench in the fours easy, and now it's like bench is like 330.
Oh,
And it's
nice. We
just
bench the same thing then.
yeah, it's funny though. I'm like, man, no, it makes a pretty big difference, guys.
Yeah.
I always like to say too, I'm like, if you bench 400 pounds naturally, you will be way over 500 on steroids.
Yeah.
Like I everything I've seen. If you can get to 400 on nothing, you'll smoke 500 pounds on any anabolics.
I'm just wondering in terms of like limb length and stuff, like how tall are you and do you have longer arms or legs?
Yeah, I do. I have longer arms. Specifically, I'm 6 feet tall.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I mean, because for like you, nowhere near your strength, but deadlift was always my best lift. I'm 6'1".
yep.
I have a 6'4" arm span. And I have quite long legs as well. Like, there's another guy I podcast with, and we were almost the same height, and we measured our legs, and I think my legs had like 3 inches on his, just at the same height. Um, so I have very long legs. My squat was always garbage, but my deadlift was decent, and not surprisingly, given the leverages there.
That's pretty much how I'm. Deadlift always came a lot easier than the other lifts. And
Yeah.
bench has always been like I gotta grind away to get any progress on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we can't understate how much everything helps. Like people love to downplay that. And I've been there before where I've done that, but um, it makes a big difference.
Well, and what the way it happens is because it's very rare that, and it sometimes people wait a long time, but most people who have used anabolics, it's not like, hey, I trained for 20 years naturally and
Yes.
then I did it. What happens is they were making progress
Yep.
around year 7 or 8, whatever. It started to slow down. Some people don't even wait that long. So they're still gaining naturally, maybe 5 pounds, whatever. Then they do a beginner cycle, and now they just gain 10 pounds or whatever, right? And then, I mean, some people with a great response gain even more than that, right? But the point is, like, instead of having like the natural trajectory of this, they just keep going and they just assume, well, no, I've just been working my ass off, which many have, right? They're still working hard. I've been working my ass off this whole time. I had better genetics than you. You couldn't do what I do. You don't know how hard I push in the gym. All of these things that some of them are true. And they forget, they don't realize, oh, if I wasn't on these things, I would have plateaued 25 pounds ago. And it's refreshing to hear somebody, with the experience that you do to acknowledge that. And there's another guy, Cornelius Parkin, if you've heard him. I've had him on the podcast as well. He'll say the same thing. He was like, 30, 40 pounds added to his stage weight with like moderate cycles. And so as somebody who is not blasting away, and I know other people like me who find it frustrating when people say like, oh, it's just a little bit of a difference. It's like, dude, it's really not a little bit of a difference.
No, that's a pretty accurate synopsis of like how it is, because that's exactly how it goes. You're making progress still. You might be at that 8 years of training. You don't need them yet, but you're just like, all right, and then you just keep going up in that peak
Yeah.
instead of things tapering off. So that pretty much sums it up exactly how it went for me. Because now it's crazy. I'm almost like after being on for almost 10 years, it's like I have to relearn how to do this. And I'm almost
Yeah.
like, wow, this is harder than I thought.
Right.
Because you get into this skewed mentality of like you're always getting help in some way. And
Yeah.
now it's like, oh, you don't have that. So now you really have to figure things out. And it's just it's a complete eye opener because I almost forgot what it was like not to have help, which is
Right.
what I think happens to a lot of people.
Yep.
Because a lot of people, even if they don't cycle, they're still going to be on like hormone replacement doses, which is still a significant boost.
Yeah.
And I'm
Definitely.
still very skeptical of a lot of I don't know. I don't know how much I believe some of the numbers I see naturally put up as well. And I
Yeah.
look at the physiques and I'm like, that doesn't make sense. I know that you can't, the amount of vascularity and the muscle shape and things that I would see when I was on cycle. I see people who some of the higher end natural people have that same look or
Yeah.
crazy strength levels, and I'm very skeptical.
I think you said
So
before that you feel like as much as people talk about like fake natties in bodybuilding world, that happens almost just as much in the powerlifting world, right? People are just kind of lying about their status and making it seem like it's just their own hard work or genetics and not discussing that they're on anything.
yeah, definitely. And then the other thing now we have SARMs, and SARMs
Mm,
they help tremendously as well, especially like something like Rad 140, and people will take that, and there's just so many ways to like cheat the system that I don't know. I know there's some genetic outliers out there, but I see a lot of the numbers and some numbers naturally surpass the untested numbers. I'm
yeah.
just like, this doesn't make any sense.
Right. Yeah. Like what if you
I
took
see how
something?
you guys look. I'm like, I used to look like that when I was on like, when I was full on. So
Hmm.
my genetics may not be as good as yours, but it's still very suspicious to me. I
Yeah.
don't
Sure.
have vascularity at all anymore. Like
Mm.
I'm lean, but I don't have this vascularity like popping out everywhere. Whereas I used to have that all the time, stuff like that. It's very, I don't know.
Do you know, I'm guessing you probably didn't test it, but any idea what your testosterone levels were at before you jumped on anything, like when you were 20?
Oh yeah, I actually do.
Oh wow.
I did it because I did drug tested meats, a couple
Oh,
of them.
right. Okay.
And well, one of them after it was right after the meet, so my test was depleted. It was like in the 400s because I'd just
Okay.
done a competition and destroyed myself. But one, I actually that was pretty accurate. I was 19. I started when I was 20. One I'd done when I was 19, and it was 832
Okay.
total test, free test. I don't. This the tricky thing with free test. The scale is always different, but the scale went from like 9 to 30 for the normal range, and I was at 33. Um, my
So your
doctor
natural
actually,
free test was already above range.
yes, this was 19 years old. I specifically, I wish I still had it around, but I remember that 100%. It was 832.
Okay.
Whereas like the highest I ever saw on a cycle was like 3,200.
That's actually not that high
Yeah.
relative to what some people. Now, you were obviously taking things besides testosterone.
Yes.
So it's hard to say, but so on that 3,200, what was your testosterone dose?
I think that was around 750. I never, only one occasion I went crazy with the testosterone dose just to see if it would do anything.
Yeah.
And I always saw a point of diminishing return past 750 milligrams a
Okay.
week. So that was typically where I would, as high as I would go. But I did at one time try like 1,500 going into a meet. And I just didn't see any benefit past certain ranges. Now, the thing from my understanding, every anabolic steroid outside of testosterone will not directly influence your test levels. So if you take trenbolone, it's not going to necessarily raise your test levels. That's what I believe.
Yeah, that's correct. And I remember actually even, again, this is probably a decade ago, so not to like pick on him because I've talked to Jason Blaha offline a little bit, or I guess online, but off air. And I like the guy, but I remember one time on a video, and again, this was super long ago, he said that other anabolics will show up as testosterone in your blood work, and that's not the case. It's not accurate. So unless you have fake gear, right? Somebody says, "Hey, here's
Yeah.
Primo," and they just sold you like test propionate or something like that. Then that's not going to happen. So, what was your total highest dose overall?
Well, this was actually not that long ago. So this was 2019, November. I just kind of said to myself, I was like, all right, I'm going to go all out to try to deadlift 904 in a meet. And I didn't cut weight. I was like 257 pounds. This was the final 2 weeks. So this is typically how it works. It's not like someone plans out a calculated cycle. You just kind of increase the dose as the meet gets closer. So the last 2 weeks, I did 1,500 tests. I did 1,200 milligrams of NPP, nandrolone, and then I did 40 milligrams halotestin, which just about killed me because not literally, but the actual nausea was insane. Like the liver
Wow.
toxicity was through the roof to the point where I would take it, and within 30 minutes of taking it, I felt like I was going to vomit if I would sit up. I would have to lay down on the couch because if I got up at all, I just was like, I'm going to throw up, and I couldn't eat anything, and just very harsh drug. And then I was
Yeah.
also on some Anavar, which
Okay.
I had to take the dose down because the combination of Anavar and Halo was so liver toxic. Just really the Halo
Yeah.
that I couldn't withstand much. That was the highest I ever went with things. I haven't done Trenbolone in over 3 years because it makes me like a psychopath.
Really.
Um, Completely alters my brain chemistry. Um, but the highest I went with that was 700 a week. But that was always consistent with volatile relationships and hair trigger temper and paranoia like crazy and just general insecurity, and it's just like a complete basket case on that stuff.
Wow. So it looks like, I mean, if I add that up, that's close to 3,500 milligrams, maybe at like the highest. And so for people who are hearing the doses, when you're talking about a dose, you're talking about a weekly dose, but when you talk about orals, you're talking about a daily dose, right? Um,
Yes.
so yeah, I mean, that's certainly high. I've heard some insane. There was a guy who was on a forum, you know, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years ago now, and he died, but he was on like 10 grams a week, which is just like mind-boggling that somebody
That's
was on.
I can't imagine because I you feel like a pincushion and you feel so
Yeah,
terrible
right.
at even a few grams that I'm like, I don't know how anyone could withstand that much because
Well, he didn't, right? I mean, he died,
yeah, he
so
died. Well, that's a good point.
yeah, it's crazy.
Certain things are much harsher than others too.
Sure,
Like
definitely.
Trenbolone and Halotestin are just
Yeah.
the whole
Did
league of their
you?
own.
How much did you weigh before you started anabolics?
I got up to 230 naturally.
Okay, so
It wasn't
you
like as
go ahead.
lean, but
Okay. So you're probably a leaner 217 and you were maybe a softer 230. So you're maybe
Hmm.
around where you got to naturally now, would you say?
Yes, actually, I'm really close on all fronts. Like I'm right
Strength
around the
wise
same
too. And
strength wise, everything. Like I'm
wow.
basically at that same point. Now the question is, can I get past that point in the
Right.
coming, next year or so? But we'll
Yeah.
see. I'm just realizing it's a lot slower of a process.
Right. Right. So you basically did 9 years of anabolics, got up to these crazy highs. I think it's safe to say, obviously, if you stayed on TRT, you could have maintained a lot of that. And I think
Oh
that's
yeah.
what a lot of these guys do, right? They say, well, and frankly, like I'm not against anabolics. If you're making the choice for the right reasons, whatever your right reasons are, you understand the consequences, I don't care what somebody does. So in theory, blast away 9 years, say, hey, now I'm going to focus on health, stay on TRT. This is what, well, again, I don't want to name names, but we know people who do this. And
Everybody.
what's that? Everybody.
Everybody.
Right. And then they say, now then you have to factor in, well, can you be as healthy at 250? Let's say you stayed on 60 milligrams. I have no question that you could, from a hormonal standpoint, be just as healthy on 80 milligrams of testosterone, 100 milligrams, whatever, as natural levels. There's a little bit of conflicting evidence there, but most evidence shows CRT is relatively safe. But just being 250 might be less healthy. In fact, it probably
Yes.
would be. So,
Yes.
yeah, you can find a way to kind of game the system and keep the gains even without blasting. But are you going to be as healthy staying 250 year round compared to maybe a lean 210? I think the evidence would show probably not. There's not a lot of people who are 250 living to be 90 years old. It happens, but not. It's a lot more rare.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point because that's what everybody does is they'll still be on like 250 milligrams of test a week and be like, oh, I'm healthy now, I'm in everything, but you can maintain so much on that.
Mhm.
Like you can maintain, you won't be at your peak strength. Like obviously you're not gonna be as strong as you were if you were on like Trenbolone, but
Sure.
you can still be pretty strong and everything. And that was a big motivation for me. Like I wanted to drop my body weight to get rid of sleep apnea because I had it untreated for like 10 years and I just I didn't I wanted to get rid of it as much as I could. So
Yeah.
I knew that being 250 or even 240 was not optimal. And so I'm
Yeah.
like, let me get down to a reasonable weight. And
And that
I
was one
want
of
to
the
compete
things.
at 198.
Oh, okay. Wow. Because that was one of the things we were going to talk about is the sleep apnea. Because I do treat patients with sleep apnea, and I don't know if you have a CPAP already. Do you?
I've had one, but I just never used it.
Okay. Have you had a recent test for your sleep apnea?
No, I
No.
my first test I had when I was like 20,
Hmm.
and it was pretty bad at that point even.
Oh wow. Okay.
So I basically the last 10 years went without doing anything about it, and because I just like I said, it's that whole attitude of you're in your 20s, you're invincible.
Sure.
Um, but I really wanted to try to do something productive with it and get my weight down. That was a big motivation right there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just being heavier in general, you obviously have a pretty thick neck, and then that's a risk factor itself at the extreme levels there. But it's definitely, as I'm sure you know by now, it correlates with a lot of health issues. So that sleep apnea, if you still do have bad sleep apnea, I mean, that should be up there on priorities, I think, for you.
What are the main risk factors with sleep apnea?
You mean like what
What
does it cause or what?
Yeah, what does it cause?
Okay. So yeah, because if I look at actual like risk factors for it,
Or yeah, my bad. No, that's the wrong phrasing.
yeah, but maybe I should go into that too. So risk factors, people who just have a larger tongue, actually sleeping on your back, just in general, because you're talking about a mechanical position of the tongue going back, a thick neck itself, and that's why. So I've made a couple of
Yep.
videos on neck training. As you can tell, I don't have a particularly thick neck, but I had an even skinnier neck before. So I don't know what yours measures. I'm guessing looking at you, 18 plus. Have you ever measured your neck?
Well, it used to be like close to 20 inches, and
Yeah.
now it's like 17 and a half.
Okay. So mine started at like 15 and now it's like 16 and a quarter. So that's why people say, oh, well, could it cause apnea? But it's like, again, context, right? If somebody has a 20-inch neck, yeah, I probably wouldn't recommend doing more neck training. If somebody's starting with
Yeah.
a 15-inch neck, it's just not, this big concern. But that's another risk factor as well as just weight in general. And there's a genetic component to it. But the gold standard is just to get a test done. I mean, they do have the at-home tests now, which are more accurate than they used to be. But in general, like I've had 2 tests now, and they both showed like no to mild apnea. But I had all these wires hooked up, and I'm in a
Yeah,
facility doing it, so it's a whole thing. As far as things that it correlates with a lot of issues. Now, again, when you look at, okay, obesity correlates with sleep apnea. Obesity itself correlates with a whole host of health issues, right?
yeah.
So is somebody who just happens to have sleep apnea, but is otherwise in shape and thin, they're just one of those anomalies that has sleep apnea. Are they going to have the same risks as somebody who's 250, 260 with sleep apnea? No, I'm sure they're not. But in general, you do see a correlation with all of these health issues. And like if you look at like rates of cardiovascular disease, cardiovascular events, there's a significant correlation with sleep apnea. So in general, it is something that I think should be looked at. And if you haven't had a test in a while, and if your insurance covers it, I'd do it. I mean, like I said, the at-home tests are more reliable now than they used to be. So
Okay. Yeah, I haven't had it done in, like I said, 10 years, but I'd be really curious to see what's going on.
for
I
sure.
don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
But that was one of the
Um,
things, just trying to get lighter.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it really is a factor. I know a lot of people want to think, well, I'm lean, so it doesn't matter. But 250 lean still doesn't mean you're totally healthy.
I know there's a lot of guys pushing 300 all the time, and I just don't know. I mean, that cannot be good for you. Like body weight, period. Even if it's muscle, it's not good to be that heavy. Your body doesn't want to be that heavy.
Sure.
So I've reversed course on that. I'm like, I'd rather be stronger at lighter weight classes
Yeah,
than trying to hit absolute numbers, like
yeah,
numbers that,
for
so that's
sure.
that's where my goals have changed.
So, well, just one last comment, and we'll move on. But I think it's interesting though that like so after all this time, you like hit these peaks, but now you're really focused on health, which I think is a good priority. You're basically kind of back to where you were naturally, right? Very similar. One could argue, and I think it's a reasonable argument. Well, hey, you'd be here if you never touched anything, but even more so, maybe you could have eked out a little bit more, right? Not a lot, maybe
Oh
if you're
yeah.
training that long, but you could have eked out a little bit more. So all in all, do you regret it, or would you have done it way differently?
Yeah, there's certain aspects I regret, and I would have done it differently. I would have waited like at least 5 years. Um, because I started when I was 20, so I'm not
Yeah,
surely I could have gotten quite a bit stronger than that. And I'm almost having to like go backwards now and redo everything. Um, just from a health standpoint, I think I was just way too reckless. And there's certain things I wouldn't touch, like trenbolone
mm,
and halo testing and some of these anabolics. There's certain anabolics I would have stuck to, like Anavar, Primobolan, and testosterone.
yeah,
But I just didn't care. Like there wasn't lifting was my identity. So it just made it where I was solely focused on that. And it didn't, it's like these bodybuilders, they'll do whatever it takes.
yeah,
That's how it was at the time. It's no longer that way. So yeah, I definitely have regrets about it. And I definitely would have done a lot of things differently with it. Uh, so it's looking back on it, it's like good to have learned those lessons, and it's things I can pass along to others. But um, I definitely have regrets about it. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I mean, no, I appreciate you being open about it, dude, because a lot of people aren't. And I think it's important for somebody like your age, right? It's not like you're old. It's not like you're 50 years old saying, "Oh, I wouldn't have done that in my heyday." But you're still in your 20s and you're saying that, right? And it's not also like you've had this horrible health. Like, I mean, you're trying to get back to normal, but I think when people see, oh, well, they had some crazy anomaly, right? And now they're 50 or they had a heart attack or something like that, they think, well, that wouldn't happen to me. But that's not what you're saying, right? You're just a guy who used significant doses, but not the most extreme. You're still in your 20s and you're saying, look, like this caused these issues and I do have regrets about it. And I think that's important because probably most people watching this, that I mean, if I look at like the YouTube stats, there's people from like low teens to 50s, but I think probably most people watching are late teens to 20s. And
yeah,
those are the people that need to see this message. And if they're really considering it, I don't want to tell them what to do, but my general recommendation is not to do it because when you've had health scares, I've definitely had health scares. You see, it changes you, and
yes,
it's hard to relay that unless it's happened to you, but you do what you can.
Yeah, the only thing I'm kind of like happy I didn't do was I never did never not even once did growth hormone or insulin.
Mm. Yeah.
I'm like, well, thank God I didn't do those. But
Yeah. Well, when you look at like people's heart scans, the combination of anabolics with the growth hormone can be pretty detrimental. So have you done heart scans yourself?
I did. I found out from Leo I probably shouldn't have done it, but I did a calcium score
Okay.
like a year ago,
Yeah.
and then I realized like he was like, well, there's really no point to doing it at this age. But the one positive from that, I think it showed my heart was a normal size and my lungs were.
Okay.
So I was like, all right, that's good.
So did they do an echocardiogram at the time?
No,
Okay.
this was my own idea because of what had just happened to Dallas McCarver, and I like
Yeah.
had been around him, and it freaked me out because I used to see the guy every day, so it kind of like hit home because he was 26. We were the same age. Our birthdays are like the same month. He would have
Wow.
been 30 this year in August, at just the same time I would be, and like we trained at the same gym when we were in Kentucky and when we were in Tennessee. We trained at the same gym, so when
Wow.
he passed away, I realized that maybe we're not so invincible. Um, so I got a calcium score done, and then it showed that my heart was not enlarged,
Okay.
fortunately, or anything.
Yeah, it's I think the Dallas McCarver thing definitely woke people up a little bit, because he was so young, and then it was him and Rich Piana were like I think like months apart. So that was definitely like a weird time for sure because they were both huge names.
It was like 4 weeks apart, but
Yeah.
I never thought that could happen to someone in their 20s. I was like, this is. I mean, obviously, he was pushing the envelope to a greater extent, but it's weird. Like I mean, I used to see the guy. I'm like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Like you're 26, man. You're the same age as me. Like that freaked me out pretty good. So that was when it really hit home. Like, hey, maybe this isn't a joke. Like I started changing my ways at that point to an extent, but not as much as I have now. But
Yeah.
that was pretty much when I dropped trend balone
Right. Okay.
because that stuff
Well,
is.
yeah. Well, I have definitely more to talk about, and at some point I want to get into like your training, some of that stuff. I think would be interesting, so we can definitely get you back on if you have the time.
Yes, sir.
But I know you got to go in a few minutes. So for people who saw this, for people who want to learn more about you, where can they find your stuff?
I I just have a YouTube channel basically. If you just like search my name on there, you'll
Okay.
find me. Nothing too fancy. I'm not like always on social media. Half my posts are just about food or something. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's, I'm more chill now than I used to be.
Cool. Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you taking time. And again, for everybody listening, we will have a link to the Humane Society down below.
Yeah, appreciate it, buddy.